Hello and welcome to the concluding video in the Marketing for Charities series, Briefing 15. This is brought to you by the Worshipful Company of Marketors, and my name is Peter Rees, and it's my pleasure to be with you for this final briefing. So as usual, let me go through the agenda items that we're going to cover in this, the final briefing in the series Marketing for Charities. I'm going to start off by giving you an overview and a reminder of all the things we've covered in the previous briefings. I'm then going to go through some practical advice on how to get started, because we've covered a huge amount of information together and I imagine that it can be a little bit daunting knowing where to start. So I'm giving you two options here. There's a sort of quick start option and a more detailed and more in-depth way of getting this off the ground for your organisation. In section 3 I'll be making a plea to you to help others to share this information that you've now learnt and the knowledge and understanding and application that I've been through with you, and asking your help to share this with other people in the charity sector. Finally, I will be reminding you how you can have any questions answered and finish as always with some concluding remarks. So let's have a gentle stroll through the programme and a review and reminder of all the topics that we've covered. In the first video, I gave you an introduction to the programme as a whole and explained the structure of it, and we talked about the definition of marketing and how the standard commercial definition needs to be adapted for the specific wants and needs of charities. We also looked at models of exchange, and I shared with you my ideas about the magic of charities. In briefing 2, we moved on and looked at the whole concept of marketing planning. And if you remember, I gave you my definition of marketing and building a fruitcake and explained that most marketing plans are built on a standard framework of analysis, decision, implementation and control. And then I talked about a more sophisticated model, which is in fact the one we've used for this briefing series, which was the SOSTAC model created by P.R. Smith. And it's that framework that we've used for all subsequent briefings. In briefing 3, we started to look at the practical application of the SOSTAC model, and I started off with a general introduction to the first step of marketing planning in SOSTAC, which is the S for situation analysis. And before we got out into a lot of detail, I gave you some general overview and some tips and techniques on practical market research approaches to establish your starting point for your marketing journey. And we also talked about the concept of stakeholders, and I introduced you to the power interest matrix. If as I go through this you need any reminders, by all means feel free to go back and review and remind yourself of any of the topics in any of these briefings. And then in briefing 4 I got into the area of situation analysis in a little bit more detail, and I explained to you that there's 3 levels in which you can analyse the business. There's the macro factors using the steeple model or the Pestel model, which look at the business world as a whole. There's the Porter's 5 forces model, which looks at the particular characteristics and factors within your own market segment. And finally there's the micro analysis using the SWOT model, which talks about a detailed analysis of your own organisation. And I explained the necessity to keep reviewing the situation analysis every few months or so to make sure that you keep up to date understanding the external and internal environmental factors that could affect your marketing operations. Moving on to briefing 5, we talked about how to set objectives, and we talked about the difference between aims, objectives, goals and targets. And I stressed the importance of setting SMART objectives, objectives that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time-bounded. And then I also gave you some information about how to set marketing budgets effectively. In briefing 6 we covered the first of 2 briefings about strategy, and in this briefing I talked about how strategy is really what is used to answer the key question. And if you remember, the key question is what is it that makes your charity better and different from your competition in ways that add value to and are valued by your target stakeholders that can't be easily copied. I then talked about the concept of the ANSOF matrix, which is new offerings and existing offerings, existing markets and new markets. And I talked about strategies for each of those 4 quadrants, giving you an example, if you remember, of a charity for bereavement counselling based in Richmond in Surrey. We talked also about how you could start to think about communicating value to your target stakeholders, whether it's donors, sponsors, volunteers or beneficiaries, and I went through some market segmentation approaches, specifically explaining the difference between commercial market segmentation and market segmentation for charities. And I talked about the complexity of charity stakeholder segments and how much more complex and sophisticated it is than normal commercial markets and commercial strategy. Briefing 7 saw us return to the area of strategy for Strategy Part 2, where we talked about ways of targeting stakeholders and deciding which markets you're going to go after and which markets you're going to serve. We talked about positioning your organisation vis-à-vis your competition using the idea of positioning map and how you could express and develop competitive advantage to answer that part of the big question that talks about being better and different from your competitors. And finally, I gave you some advice and some thoughts about how you could manage your brand in a very effective and efficient way. In Briefing 8, we moved from the area of strategy to part 1 of tactics, where I introduced the concept of the marketing mix, products and services and how you bring those to the market. And to remind you, the marketing mix is essentially the 7 Ps. Product, price, promotion, place for physical things that you deliver to the market, and people, process and physical evidence to cover the service elements of those things that you deliver to your different stakeholder groups. Moving straight along then to the next briefing, which was briefing number 9. This was part 2 of the strategy, where we started to look at integrated marketing communications. And here I introduced you to the concept of the stakeholder journey and the RICE model, if you remember, which is a 4-step model that I evolved from the RACE model, a commercial model. But the RICE model is one I specifically developed for charities, and the stages of RICE are reach, interact, connect, and the 4th stage is engage and retain. And this is something that we built on and used in subsequent sections of the tactics section, and also objectives, and finally the metrics. Briefing 10 developed these ideas further, which is the 3rd part of the tactics section of this briefing series, where we talked about marketing communication tools and techniques in more detail. And I gave you some tips, tools and techniques for each of the different stakeholder groups using both online and offline communications methods. So we really got into the detail and the depth of marketing communications in this briefing. Briefing 11 particularly focused on campaign management and fundraising, and this was part 4 of tactics in briefing 11. We used the RICE model again to talk about the tactics we used building communications campaigns with some tips and tools for efficient and effective fundraising. Briefing number 12 was a sort of bonus for you, and this was the Economic Recovery Guide. And here I presented ideas from my colleagues in the Marketers Company outreach team who put together a practical guide with suggestions for short-term urgent attack kind of tactics to deal with the current economic situation that many charities are suffering from in the world today. This slide shows the final 3 briefings in the series, the first of which is briefing 13, which was all about action planning, project management and effective meeting practice. And if you remember, I gave you 2 approaches here. The first one was based on Microsoft Excel, which is a quick and easy approach for charities on a budget or charities with less complex projects. But I also shared with you my use of Microsoft Project, which is a more sophisticated tool for charities with a larger budget or who wish to manage more complex projects. And if you remember, it covered areas such as the task management, the timetable, the connectivity of different events within a project, and the whole area of resource planning and management. The final briefing in the formal content within this series was briefing 14, the last briefing, which was all about controlling the marketing plan. And here we talked about the areas of metrics, key performance indicators and analytics. And this was the final piece you needed to complete the RICE worksheets, which you've been building up through the objectives and the tactics sections covered in earlier briefings. So having completed briefing 14, you should be in a position to put together a complete management system to use appropriate metrics to manage the tactics you put in place to deliver the objectives which you set earlier in the programme. So that's it. That brings us to the end of the marketing content, which brings us to this briefing, briefing 15, where I'm summarising what we've learnt, and now I'm going to go on and give you some advice about how you can implement all of these ideas for your charity. So having looked at all these areas, you can see we've covered a huge amount of information, and it can be quite daunting, and often people don't really know where to start. You've learnt all this stuff, but how do you actually now apply it in a practical sense that will give value to your charity? And that's what I'm going to cover on the next couple of slides, where I go into some ideas on advice for implementing the concepts that you've learnt so far. So let's look at possible ways you could actually implement and develop all of these ideas and use them in a practical way in your own organisation. So in these briefings, by now you've seen over 400 slides and watched more than 7 hours of video briefings. And applying this can sometimes be a bit daunting or a bit overwhelming. So let me give you two possible approaches. The first one I'm going to show you on this slide talks about, if you like, the full journey, if you want to do the whole program. And this is developing a full marketing plan using the concepts that I've outlined for your organisation. So if you want to do the complete marketing plan, I suggest you take the following steps. And this is based on my practical experience. I've been assisting charities for about 10 or 12 years now, working with the Marketors Livery Company. And what has worked very successfully is the following approach. If you and the people in your charity can form a team of responsible people to take joint ownership of the marketing plan moving forward, work through the briefing series one by one, and it's important, if you're going to take this full approach, that you complete all of the briefings. So everybody in the team should watch all of the 15 briefings in this series. It's about 7 hours worth of video, as I said, which you can split, and watch an hour a day, so it's not too onerous, in fact, if you split it out and watch the pieces one at a time. Once you've completed the process, get back into the team and complete the process described in each step. And as we've been through these briefings, I've given you different actions to take about setting objectives, about doing situation analysis, about formulating strategy, developing tactics, communications. So I've tried to break down the work to build a marketing plan into individual steps, which you'll see mentioned as you went through this video series. And what you should do is delegate and share the responsibility for the different steps. So for example, if you're going through step 1 and doing a situation analysis, 1 or 2 people in the team might do the macro analysis using the pastel model. Some other people in the team might do the sector analysis using the Porter's 5 forces, and a third group of people, or one person, could do the internal analysis, the SWOT model, which just focuses on your own organisation. So delegate and share the responsibility for the different steps. Once you've all completed the individual tasks, consolidate it back into one holistic complete document, which is version 1 of your marketing plan. You'll find then there's some tweaking and some tuning that's required, so work together to formulate version 2 and let that be your final version, which you use to manage your first planning period, whether it's a quarter, 6 months or the year ahead. So build your first marketing plan and start to use it and measure your progress using the control systems, the analytics and the metrics that we've talked about in briefing number 14. Then continuously review the project as you go through the year. Let's say you do a situation analysis once a quarter, you have quarterly meetings or monthly meetings to review your progress against the different objectives that you have, and manage and adapt as you go through the year. And as I explained before, if you get behind on any of the metrics, the objectives that you're trying to achieve, work out the steps you need to take, which typically would involve tailoring or adjusting the marketing mix. And that's my recommendation for an approach if you want to do the complete program and a full marketing plan. If on the other hand you're a charity with more limited resources, you might want to do version 2 of the program, which I'm calling a tactical improvement plan. So again, I recommend that you watch all of the briefings first of all and then decide which pieces of it are most relevant to the specific needs of your charity. It might be something to do with strategy or the marketing mix or communications or service offerings. You decide what it is that you want to do and what's the most important priority, the quick wins for your charity. And then in that case, form a team, if possible. It might be just 1 or 2 of you involved if you're a very small charity, but form a team or work alone and focus on the briefing or briefings that particularly address your most urgent need. As I say, it might be marketing communications or market research or budgeting, but whatever it is, start there. Complete the process described in that step, understand what's required, and perhaps fill in the relevant sheet of the RISA work steps if that's relevant for the task you've chosen. If possible, delegate and share the completion of the task or tasks and treat and create a project plan. Set aims and objectives, as I explained before, then execute the plan, measure and report progress, and then take corrective action if necessary. So for a smaller charity, you might decide that what you're going to do is going to take 1 quarter and it's a particular communications plan to do with economic recovery, or it's a communications plan, for example, to target a new group of beneficiaries, or it's a plan to recruit more fundraisers or more supporters or more volunteers. So whatever it is, it might be a short-term tactical plan just using 1 or 2 steps out of the total briefing program. But again, I recommend you watch the whole program, and that will give the opportunity to see which pieces are going to provide the quickest return and the best value for you for your particular shorter project. I'll finish off now with a plea to all of you who have watched this video, and it's my request for you to in fact help others. Now, this project has been a bit of a labour of love for me. I've been planning to do something for marketing for charities for many years. First I thought of writing a book, and then I decided to do it as a series of video briefings, and the 2020 lockdown gave me the opportunity to do this and to create this whole programme, which I've now made into PowerPoint slides and then narrated into videos and brought them to you, has taken 6 months of my time to complete, and I hope you found it of value and of interest. If you have found the programme, then please pass it on to others that you may know in the charity sector, whether it's people you're connected to through your friends, through your family, through charity organisations, through charity member organisations. Then please share what you've learned for others. If they're in a different sector, they're not going to be competing with you. So please share these ideas if you found them of value, so that others may benefit from what I've tried to share and bring to you in this briefing series. If you have any questions, or if I can assist, then please let me know, and I'll remind you on the next slide of my contact details. So it just reminds me to thank you so much for taking the time to go through this video series. I really do hope that you've found it of interest and value, and I wish you every possible success. And this is me, Peter Rees, sending you my very best regards here in October 2020. So if you do have any requests for information, there's any questions I can answer, or if you think I can help further, then please by all means email me at this contact address, peter.rees@gmail.com. So I'll leave you for the last time in this briefing series with some concluding remarks, and of course a quotation, this time from a French poet and playwright who was born in 1880 and lived just until the end of the First World War, a gentleman called Guillaume Apollinaire, who said the following: "Come to the edge," he said. "We can't, we're afraid," they responded. "Come to the edge," he said. "We can't, we will fall," they responded. "Come to the edge," he said. So they came, and he pushed them, and they flew. And I'm just hoping that this briefing programme has given you opportunity to really fly and make a difference to the world with the fantastic work that you do for your charity in your organisation. My very best wishes to you all. So it just remains for me to wrap up for this last time in this briefing series and say thank you so much for participating. I really hope you found this programme of use and of interest, and you'll be able to take these ideas and use them in the context of your own charity. Perhaps we'll meet again in the future. Until we do, I'll just say goodbye for now. Good luck and good marketing.